Hello, I'm Daniel Shore. President Nixon's road to disaster would lead him into a collision with the special prosecutor investigating Watergate and into a confrontation with Congress. A special Senate committee headed by a homespun Southern Democrat broke open the Watergate scandal and began to lay the groundwork for impeachment in the House. At first, President Nixon adopted a posture of complete cooperation with the investigations.
The new nominee for Attorney General, Elliot Richardson, and the special prosecutor that he will appoint in this case will have the total cooperation of the executive branch of this government. They will get to the bottom of this thing. They will see to it that all of those who are guilty are prosecuted and are brought to justice.
If that happened, President Nixon would be in desperate trouble. He had ordered the cover-up of the bugging of Democratic headquarters at the Watergate. That was a criminal obstruction of justice. Now the president's former counsel, John Dean, had given evidence against him, and the cover-up was coming apart. To preserve his claim of innocence, Nixon was forced to appoint as his new Attorney General the administration's Mr. Clean.
He said, I want you to follow the evidence wherever it may take you, even to the White House itself.
Did you believe him?
I believed him enough to feel that I was entitled to treat him at his word.
Richardson's appointment had to be confirmed by the Senate, where the Democrats had a majority. The Senate insisted that Richardson name a special prosecutor for Watergate who would be truly independent. They wanted a Democrat, but the White House was shocked by Richardson's choice, his old law professor, a liberal who had worked for the Kennedys, Archibald Cox.
Cox was a known Nixon hater, a Democratic zealot, a very talented and intelligent man, but he no sooner became involved in the investigation of Watergate than he reached his tentacles out into anything he could find, which would have provided the grist for the material of impeaching the president.
The committee will come to order, and counsel will call the first witness.
Mr. John W. Dean III.
Stand up and raise your right hand. Do you swear that the evidence that you shall give to the Senate...
Only John Dean had testified that the president was criminally involved in the Watergate cover-up.
The meeting with the president that afternoon with Haldeman, Ehrlichman, and myself was a tremendous disappointment to me because it was quite clear that the cover-up, as far as the White House was concerned, was going to continue.
Dean's version of a series of meetings with Nixon was denied by the White House. Cox needed proof. Then the most improbable and complete proof came to light.
Mr. Butterfield, are you aware of the installation of any listening devices in the Oval Office of the President?
I was aware of listening devices. Yes, sir.
When were those?
The revelation that the president had all his meetings automatically recorded meant that the tapes must contain the answer to the key question. Was the president directly involved in the cover-up? But he refused to surrender the tapes to the special prosecutor.
It therefore becomes my duty promptly to seek subpoenas and other available legal procedures for obtaining the evidence for the grand jury. We will initiate such...
On behalf of the grand jury investigation of Watergate, Cox had a subpoena served on the President of the United States, ordering him to produce 9 specific White House tapes.
One day, Mr. Cox came to us in the jury room and said to us that Mr. Nixon wasn't going to honor the subpoena, and what do we want to do about it.
Notching up the pressure, Cox got the grand jury to vote an order enforcing the subpoena. But the judge told Cox that this unprecedented case called for a breach of the rule of grand jury secrecy.
My jaw figuratively dropped when he said to me, "Well, Mr. Cox, I don't really doubt your word, but I think I shouldn't simply accept what you say about the grand jury's vote. I ought to have them in open court and poll them." It was a marvelously symbolic scene. There were the 19, 20 grand jurors lined up. They'd be the first 20 people you met on the street. Some black, some white, some employed, others without jobs, old, so forth.
We were really adamant in our position that we had a right as the grand jury people to hear what was on the tapes. And they were really in what we thought were in the public domain. We thought they weren't President Nixon's tapes. We thought they were the public's tapes.
The court, after hearing the presentation, signed the order to show cause. It is returnable August 7 at 10 a.m.
Nixon's lawyers argued that the president's work and that of his successors would be in jeopardy if judges ran roughshod over the confidentiality of presidential meetings. His principles happily coincided with self-interest. The tapes that Cox had subpoenaed were the ones in which the president and his aides plotted the cover-up. One of the most damning was a discussion with John Dean about paying hush money to the Watergate burglars.
It will compound the obstruction of justice situation. People around here are not pros at this. I mean, there's sort of thing mafia people can do.
Each day, a president of the United States is required to make difficult decisions on grave issues.
It will cost money. I would say these people are going to cost $1 million over the next few years. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that we're you can get $1 million and you can get it in cash. I know where it can be gotten. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not easy.
This kind of frank discussion is only possible when those who take part in it know that what they say is in strictest confidence.
That argument really doesn't prevail. A president, we don't think, would be held by a court to have the right to have secret criminal conversations.
It was not only in pursuit of the tapes that Cox took on the president. His sweeping mandate required him to investigate all presidential abuses. Even the purchase of Nixon's California home at San Clemente was open to Cox's scrutiny. Nixon was outraged.
The president really had concluded as he watched Cox go about his duties that this was a battle to the death, I think, and he said in my hearing, I'm going to get rid of this man.
Before he could act, another scandal hit the White House. Spiro Agnew, the vice president, was under investigation for taking bribes as governor of Maryland. When the attorney general concluded that there was a case, he briefed the president on the details.
I thought the president would be deeply shaken, but his first reaction was, oh God, well, that doesn't surprise me. All the Maryland politicians are like that.
Nixon asked the head of the Justice Department's criminal division, Henry Peterson, to double-check the evidence. Peterson and Richardson reported back the case was solid. They had testimony that Agnew had continued taking bribes even in the White House. One of the many contractors who testified said that when he went to the vice president's office, he handed him an envelope containing approximately $10,000 in cash.
Peterson, not in anger, but in sorrow, said that it was his professional judgment that the charges first were serious. He went on to say, and Richardson strongly said this too, that they would have to recommend a prison sentence for Agnew.
With the right-wing Agnew as his running mate, Nixon had won 2 elections. Now the president could do nothing to help Agnew.
Even if they were framing Agnew, there wasn't any question after hearing Peterson and his version that he was frankly going to get it.
Nixon sent his chief of staff to tell the vice president he must resign. But the man from Baltimore wouldn't go quietly.
In the process of pressuring the vice president, it became very clear that he saw me as part of the problem. And I jokingly said to my wife one night, I said, if I suddenly don't show up tomorrow night for dinner, you better look into the most recently constructed bridge pilings on the Baltimore Bay Bridge.
Because of Watergate, a presidential resignation no longer seemed inconceivable. In that event, this vice president would automatically succeed him. That, to Justice Department insiders, was a nightmare scenario.
Well, the fear I think we all had was that if we went forward with a prosecution, that we'd have the vice president of the United States sitting on the witness stand, raising his right hand, swearing to tell the truth when the doors of the courtroom would burst open and in would come somebody saying the President of the United States has just resigned. You've got your hand up, all right, but we want you to take the oath of office.
The prosecutors didn't really have a choice. The vice president had to be brought to justice. But when Richardson and his constitutional expert, the Solicitor General, decided to have Agnew indicted, the president's staff tried to stop them.
It went on for about an hour and a half. Neither side gave way at all. And Haig said, all right, let's go see the president. Well, at that point, Richardson and I said we have to stop in the men's room. We didn't have to, but we wanted to talk. And we went in. By that time, the issue of tapes and so forth was so sensitive. We went in and turned all the water taps on so we could talk without being overheard. I don't think it was tape, it was bugged, but everybody was paranoid by that time. And Elliott said, we have to resign if we can't indict Agnew, don't we? I said, yes, we do.
And Bork said a vice president could be tried on charges by the regular courts.
Agnew was trying to escape a court trial. He claimed the constitutional process was for a vice president to be impeached before Congress.
My view was less technical. I was concerned about having 2 impeachment have the idea of impeachment in the air, as of an actual impeachment proceeding going on, that it would liable to be contagious.
Nixon saw the point. He chose the lesser of 2 evils and let Agnew's prosecution go ahead. But the vice president had one more trick up his sleeve. He turned a public appearance in California into a demonstration of support among the party faithful.
You're very kind, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate the warmth of your greeting. I want to say at this point, clearly and unequivocally, I am innocent of the charges against me. I will not resign if indicted. I will not resign if indicted.
That was Agnew's last stand. Outside his hard-right constituency, he had no backing. And so secretly he offered both to resign and to plead guilty to a lesser charge, provided that he not be sent to prison. The Attorney General gathered his team to consider Agnew's proposal. To the prosecutors who had built the case, the whole idea was an affront to the principle of equal justice.
You don't give this guy a significantly better deal than you'd give anybody else who had done that just because he's blackmailing the Department of Justice by, in effect, saying, if you don't give me the deal I want, I'm going to stay in the vice presidency and maybe become president.
But Henry Peterson, the most senior civil servant in the room, saw a different problem.
I had just made some presentation, the importance of treating this guy equally, which meant very harshly. And Peterson paced up and down, and he had his hands thrust in his belt, which was his way, and he literally yelled, "The man is the goddamn Vice President of the United States, Barney. What do you want to do, make him crawl on his belly?"
Richardson yielded. He guaranteed that Agnew would not go to jail. In return, the vice president promised to resign. He left for the Baltimore courthouse as vice president. Then his letter of resignation was delivered, and so he appeared before the judge as a private citizen. He pleaded no contest to tax evasion and was fined.
Tonight, study the behavior of the baboon on the nature of things. Then meet the orangutan of the rainforest on the natural world. And convicts discuss life behind bars on Discovery Sunday. Tonight on the Discovery Channel.
Hi, I'm Jed Longhurst with MCI, and because I joined Friends and Family too, I can show you how easily it works for me. I save 20% on calls to anyone I choose, no matter which long-distance company they're with. For example, Jack, my brother-in-law, he's still with AT&T. But watch closely because Jack may switch to MCI's Friends and Family too. He'll do it if he's smart, which he's not. But if he does, I'll save 40% when I call him, and even though he doesn't deserve it, he'll save 40% when he calls me.
The future, where people will work together across vast distances of space and time. Better make sure your computer has built-in networking. Power Macintosh is here, and the future is better than you expected. Now, see the world's most powerful business software accelerated for Power Macintosh.
Dinner is served.
They had a Ming vase. They had a Rembrandt. Even Louis XVI's favorite chair. But of all their prized possessions, there's only one they haven't had to replace. The Range Rover. Range Rover. The world's most capable luxury vehicle.
Retirement years should be secure years. That's why Merrill Lynch has a gerontologist to help us understand the social, emotional, and financial needs these years bring. That extra insight can make a difference between seeking security and finding it. The difference is Merrill Lynch.
Thursdays, nuts and bolts, tools of the trade, the everyday and the extraordinary. Movie magic, followed by The Secret Life of Machines. Thursday at 10 Mountain, 9 Central on the Discovery Channel.
Through every stage of life, your United Way gift makes a difference in our community. It gives a child like Casey a chance to grow healthy and strong. It helps a teenager like Myron get an education and a future. It offers someone like Mary love and comfort in her later years. From all of us at Comcast, thank you for supporting our United Way.
Thank you!
Be the difference. See the difference. United Way.
Hi, I'm Charlene Crean. My husband Andy. He came home one day, he bought an Italian restaurant. I knew my cooking wasn't that good, but I never thought he'd go to that extreme. Come to visit us. We have fun. It's good Italian food, and we need the money.
Mr. Vice President, thank you.
In Agnew, the law had hit a mighty target. The president set about trying to make certain that he would not be next.
As we were walking to the door, the president said something like, well, now that has been dealt with, we can go ahead and get rid of Cox.
I mean, it was head-to-head warfare. It was a struggle for Richard Nixon's presidency. And he approached his attitude towards Cox was on that basis, not a matter of some disagreement over a legal issue, but it was life and death of his presidency.
Cox's demand for the White House tapes was moving to a climax in the courts. He had won the opening rounds, but the president's lawyers doggedly appealed to a higher court.
I'd like to be successful in some case, somewhere, sometime. So far, I haven't won a thing.
On the day he chose his new vice president, Nixon lost again. The U.S. Court of Appeals ruled against him 5-2. The judges said he could appeal to the Supreme Court to overturn all previous decisions in the case, an unlikely outcome, or he had to give up the tapes. They gave the president just 1 week to make up his mind until midnight the following Friday.
We saw a very, very serious problem in that the president was not going to give up the tapes. He was determined not to.
What are you going to do if a president disobeys the order? You know, that was a terribly worrisome thing.
The confrontation could not have come at a worse time. The Arab states had just launched a massive attack on Israel. As the United States and the Soviet Union mounted airlifts to their respective allies, superpower tensions escalated towards a nuclear crisis.
This unhappy concurrence of Nixon going nose-to-nose with his two great enemies in the world, Leonid Brezhnev and Archibald Cox, had the makings of grand tragedy in it.
Against the Russians, the president could act directly, but he couldn't act alone to fire Cox. He had given away that power to the Attorney General, Elliot Richardson.
You know, it was very clear that following Agnew's resignation that the president was then determined to get rid of Mr. Cox and the whole special prosecutor apparatus as it had been set up.
And I said to Al, if you do that, you leave me no choice but to resign. And he said, well, there may be some other way of dealing with the problem.
The other way, which Haig persuaded Richardson to support, was a plan to satisfy the court and keep Cox's hands off the tapes. The White House would pick just one person to listen to the tapes. This ruse was dreamed up by one of Nixon's lawyers, Fred Bozart.
Fred Brizard came into my office with a gleam of hope in his eyes, which was not normally there, and said, Al, we have a solution that I think we may be able to cobble together, which would involve the turnover of the tapes to John Stennis of the Senate.
The senator, a 72-year-old Southern conservative, was a loyal Nixon supporter.
I went down for a very hurried little conference that didn't last over 15 minutes or 20 maybe. Monday afternoon of this week by Mr. Fred Bozard. And of course I know he was talking for the White House. He was talking for the president.
Stennis would listen to the tapes and verify the accuracy of written summaries prepared by Nixon and his lawyers. The prosecutors would have to settle for these summaries instead of the tapes.
Well, it was phony. It was phony as could be. Why pick Senator Stennis? First, he was a terrific senator for many years, but he was an old man, he couldn't hear, and he was going to listen to the tapes, and he was going to prepare a version. It was phony as it could be.
They had a picture of John Stennis in Time magazine with his hand to his ear and a caption which said, "Technical help needed." And I saw that, and I laughed so loudly that I almost fell on the floor, and as I looked up, I saw the pointy shoes of Richard Nixon looking down at me, and he did not see the humor in the situation.
I can only say that the fact that John Stennis had a problem with hearing does not mean that he could not, with the devices that are available to turn up the volume, have heard as well as anybody else.
Cox couldn't possibly agree to the plan. His list of objections focused on Stennis. He said that the task couldn't be entrusted to any one man. But the president wouldn't budge. He would not appeal to the Supreme Court, and he certainly would not turn over the tapes. Instead, on Friday morning, with the midnight deadline looming, he had Haig call Richardson back to the White House.
It was a strange meeting. I could only call it a rancid meeting.
The message to Richardson was that he was to ban Cox from issuing any more subpoenas to the president.
That, of course, put the situation in a very different light from what I had been willing to support.
The White House was counting on Cox to resign in protest when he received the ban. If he did not, then the president's survival hung on Richardson. Would he fire Cox for defying the president?
The question of what I would do in that event did not arise.
That was a crucial miscalculation, for Nixon's men thought they could rely on Richardson to do their bidding.
If Cox refused to abide by the transcripts and terminate requests for additional tapes, he would be fired.
There was agreement that Elliot Richardson was, in the language of that day and subsequent days, on board and was in agreement with the plan.
Haig reported to Nixon that Richardson might grumble, but they could count on him. The two men took a final stroll on the White House grounds before announcing, as though it were a concession, that the president would meet the court order by handing over the summaries verified by Senator Stennis.
Late. Indeed, I think I'd gone home. I got a call from Elliot Richardson saying, here's what's happened.
What happened was that the president had gone over Richardson's head and himself issued the order banning Cox from further attempts to obtain tapes, notes, or memoranda of presidential conversations. Without delay, the prosecutor turned the tables on the president.
So at that point, I turned around and came back in town to the offices in Washington and called Jim Doyle, who was very close to me, was a public relations advisor, pressman, and so forth.
This is Jim Doyle from Archibald Cox's office. I have a statement that I'm going to read as fast as you can take it. It's from Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox.
Newspaper deadlines were only 5 minutes away. I made a very short statement saying I intended to carry on with my job on the terms on which I'd accepted it.
In my judgment, the president is refusing to comply with the court decrees, period. I shall bring these points to the attention of the court and abide by its decision. Paragraph.
Cox scheduled a formal press conference for the next morning. The nation waited for the showdown between the president and the defiant prosecutor. Cox struck first, and the TV networks carried it live.
Good afternoon. This is the ballroom at the National Press Club in Washington, where Archibald Cox, the special Watergate prosecutor, is about to hold a press conference.
I read in one of the newspapers this morning the headline, Cox Defiant. I do want to say that I don't feel defiant. In fact, I told my wife this morning I hate a fight.
Indeed, to be honest, back home before we went to the press conference, I was in tears over having to do it.
But do it he did. Cox explained to the nation in a news conference why the law had to prevail.
Instruction. When criminal wrongdoing is the subject of investigation, it is simply not enough to make a compromise in which the real evidence is available only to 2 or 3 men operating in secrecy.
You consider the tapes absolutely vital to the case yourself?
I think it is vital to know.
Clarify or amplify, if possible, the 2 questions.
Decided. I have sort of a naive belief, if you'll forgive me for being corny, that what's right will prevail in the end.
I'll give you the document.
I frankly was stunned by how well he did, because Archie was not totally a public person. And this was, in the good sense, a superb political effort. It was absolutely convincing. It was human. It was almost endearing.
Way whatsoever.
Well, then my question, sir, was how could you expect to succeed in this job? How could you expect to succeed?
Well, I thought it was worth a try. I thought it was important. If it could be done, I thought it would help the country. And if I lost, what the hell?
Mr. Doc, let me ask you about this. Excuse me, Mr. Cox. The reporter's over here.
I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. Yes.
By the time the news conference was finished, even the skeptical Washington press corps had been won over.
I don't know the answer to that.
Sir, you're a great American. You really are.
This presentation of Watergate is sponsored in part by Merrill Lynch.
I want to tell you about my home far away. My mother and father are there.
Strengthening the links of communications requires capital. In the last 3 years, Merrill Lynch raised over $50 billion for communications companies around the globe. We connect investors to opportunities and the people of the world to each other. For them, it makes a difference. The difference is Merrill Lynch.
People ask me, what do you think Walt would have done? The one thing I do know that Walt would have done is something you didn't expect him to do. Back in 1937, you went to the theater to see funny little 5-minute cartoons. Walt turned it into a genuine art form. When they nominated Beauty and the Beast for the Best Picture, animated or not, wow. Fairy tales, the really good ones, do indeed have universal messages. With a play, the curtain parts, and this thing happens between an audience and a cast in a theater, and it's electric. I would say that Broadway and Disney and American Express all go together very nicely. Well, Beast has this problem with his hands, but I think he could probably manage to hold an American Express coat.
American Express is welcomed on Broadway and other magical places.
Hi, I'm Erica Seelinger with MCI. You know, 12 years ago, the cost of an average long-distance call was over $5. Today, that call is only $2.70. Now, what could have caused those rates to drop?
MCI. We helped open telecommunications to free enterprise and helped America save billions of dollars.
And now we're introducing our greatest savings program ever.
Join and save 40% to every MCI customer you choose.
Give us a call and start saving 40% today.
Choices! You gotta make choices. Hey, kid, you wanna fly? You gotta buy.
No!
Exercise the right choice.
Visit your local park and recreation department today.
Welcome to a journey into the future. Let us explore together the future. A future not of dreams, but of reality. Japan Dreaming. Monday at 10 Mountain, 9 Pacific on Discovery Showcase.
But for man, no rest and no ending. He must go on.
At the Discovery Channel, we go to extraordinary lengths to tell extraordinary stories. stories that take you off the beaten path. So if we see it, you see it. The Discovery Channel. Explore your world.
At the special prosecutor's show of defiance, Nixon decided to have him fired at once. For the Attorney General and his immediate subordinates, the moment of decision had come.
Richardson's secretary put her head in the door and said, "The Attorney General would like to see you." And I went in, and there was Ruckelshaus and Richardson and, two or three of Richardson's young aides. And it still hadn't crossed my mind what was going to happen.
It was clear that Cox was going to go. It was only a question of how, not whether. Elliot said, "I'm not going to do it." And I said, "Well, not me either. I decided that some time ago. I'm not interested in being part of this exercise."
And at that moment, for the first time, it occurred to me that I was the third in line in the Department of Justice.
At that moment, Richardson said to Bork, "Well, Bob, what are you going to do? You're next."
I said, "Let me think." And I got up and I began pacing around the office while they talked about something else. And finally I said, "Yes, I can fire him, but I'll resign immediately afterwards."
Bork said that he had felt for some time that Cox was not conducting himself correctly, that he was not doing his job right, and indeed should be fired.
The president had to fire him. There was no alternative. Cox hadn't done anything wrong, but a president can't be faced down in public by a subordinate official.
Ruckelshaus and I said, "Well, in these circumstances, Bob, you will have to go ahead and fire him. You can't have a situation in which this goes all the way down to some Deputy Assistant Attorney General, with everybody above him having left. The business of the government has to go on."
The president was frantic to prevent a rash of resignations at the Justice Department. He stood by as White House counsel Len Garman phoned the Attorney General. But Richardson was firm. When named, he had undertaken as a condition for Senate confirmation to protect Cox's independence, and he would not now break his word.
The president said, "I'm not surprised that pious bastard cares more for his ass than his country."
And we were all very stricken by the moment. And Richardson left to present his resignation to the president.
The beginning of the conversation was really quite tense and difficult because he started talking about the Middle East. This was the President of the United States, Commander-in-Chief. And he went on to say, "You realize that Brezhnev could make a very serious miscalculation in the light of what could happen if you go forward." I was considerably shaken, but I said, "Mr. President, I don't feel that I have any choice. I cannot do it." And the president said, "Elliot, I'm sorry you choose to put your purely personal commitments ahead of the public interest." And I could feel the blood rushing to my head, and I could have made a very angry response. But what I did say in as level a voice as I could muster, I said, "Mr. President, it would appear that you and I have a different perception of the public interest."
No one yet knew it, but the Saturday night massacre had begun. Next on the list was Richardson's deputy, William Ruckelshaus. Al Haig telephoned him with an ultimatum: fire Cox or resign.
Haig went into the crisis in the Middle East. He finally mentioned, "Didn't you realize this was an order from your commander-in-chief?" This was after several minutes of conversation, and I said, "Come on, Al, What are you going to do, get a tank down here and blow me out of my office? I can't do this.
General reaction to the developments today?
Well, there'll be an announcement out of the White House later on. I can't say a thing.
There will be?
Does it have to do with the resignation of the Attorney General?
Well, it might, but you'll have to get it from them. Excuse me. Thank you, Bill.
When Ruckelshaus went home, the press was still in the dark about how many potential attorneys general Nixon had gone through. The succession now passed to the number 3 man at the Justice Department.
So I got in Bork, the Solicitor General, a great constitutional lawyer.
Bob Bork was a different kind of fellow. He was a patriot, and I think a jurist of renowned dimensions, far better than either of his 2 superiors.
I went downstairs, and there were a White House driver, Bizart in the back seat, Garment in the right front seat, the passenger seat.
And we plunked him down between. He sat between Bizart and myself, so he couldn't bolt out of the door.
So I got him. We went over to the White House, to Haig's office. And Haig began explaining the international situation and how the president couldn't be faced down and so forth. And I said, I'm going to fire him. The only question is whether I resign immediately afterwards or not. He didn't look like he was interested too much in whether I resigned immediately afterwards or not, as long as I fired him. Haig took me to the Oval Office. And as I recall, the lights were kind of dim in there, and the place was very gloomy. They had not planned this kind of a massacre at all.
It began as a third-rate burglary.
While we would pull what is called a black bag job, a surreptitious entry.
It would end with the downfall of a presidency.
And then you destroy yourself.
Watergate. This in-depth home video set contains rare interviews, recently uncovered documents, and lets you hear the player's story in their own words. To order this fascinating 5-hour video for $49.95, call 1-800-652-2400.
This presentation of Watergate is sponsored in part by American Airlines.
Most people would jump at the chance. 10 days in South America. But I've done this before. I knew better.
¿Dónde está el teléfono?
Your phone's in the Admiral's Club. This was business, and I was 5,000 miles from home. There was a lot at stake, and I was on my own. Trying to keep my bearings. Trying to negotiate. Sometimes just trying to communicate. All the while hoping to pull this whole thing off as soon as possible so I could head back. 6-7 million pesos to your bottom line over the next 5 years. Yeah, I'm sorry, honey. It's gonna be another day.
My father asks us.
You know, it's funny, being away so long. When you come across something familiar, it can be a pretty welcome sight.
Going home, Mr. Reynolds?
I'm halfway there.
Hi, I'm Erica Seelinger with MCI. You know, 12 years ago, the cost of an average long-distance call was over $5. Today, that call is only $2.70. Now, what could have caused those rates to drop?
MCI. We helped open telecommunications to free enterprise, helped America save billions of dollars.
And now we're introducing our greatest savings program ever.
Join and save 40% to every MCI customer you choose.
Give us a call and start saving 40% today.
Girls and boys come out to play. The moon is shining bright as day. Leave your supper and leave your sleep. Come to your playfellows in the street. Come with a whoop and come with a call. Come with a goodwill not to talk.
The Land Rover Discovery is designed to handle virtually anything, including a family. Introducing Discovery, a family vehicle from Land Rover. It's a great place to have children.
Tonight, find out what it's really like to be behind bars.
This is not Scared Straight. This is what you'll have to deal with for the rest of your life.
Choice is yours. Choices. Then relive one day, one typical 24-hour period in our country, where 61 people will be shot. A day in the death of America. Tonight, beginning at 10 Mountain, 9 Pacific, on Discovery Sunday.
Before you...
Each day you see the difference your United Way gift makes in our community. It's the difference between an infant born at risk or given the chance to grow, between a teenager losing hope or getting a second chance, the difference between the elderly feeling forgotten or finding love and comfort. This year, like every year, Comcast supports United Way.
Okay, smile.
Be the difference. See the difference. United Way.
Drowning is preventable. Please call the Orange County chapter of the American Red Cross.
Nixon was finally rid of his troublesome prosecutor, but it would prove harder for the White House to get rid of Cox's office and fire his staff. The FBI agent who had worked the longest on the case was Angelo Lano. He got a call from his boss.
He said, Richardson's been fired, Cox has been fired, and you have to get over and take over the prosecutor's office. And I said, what?
Acting Attorney General Bork's second order that night caused almost as much uproar as the first. It seemed designed to protect prosecution documents from the prosecutors.
Haig told me that these documents were disappearing from the special prosecutor's office. Shouldn't we put the FBI around there? And I said, yes.
Having done a hard night's work, Robert Bork went home.
The streets were pitch dark by this time, of course, and as I came out of the driveway of the Department of Justice, photographers from the press leapt out of the bushes. and I was quite surprised that this picture of me, looking like an axe murderer.
The outcry was just beginning.
The Office of the Watergate Special Prosecution Force has been abolished.
When the White House announced what it had done, the media reported it as a naked attempt by the president to overthrow the rule of law.
The country tonight is in the midst of what may be the most serious constitutional crisis in its history. The president has fired the special Watergate prosecutor, Archibald Cox, and he has sent FBI agents to the office of the special prosecution staff and to the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General, and the president has ordered the FBI to seal off those offices. That's a stunning development, and nothing even remotely like it has happened in all of our history.
We had no idea whether the Army was coming, the Marines. We had no idea whether our files would be taken away from us. We were told nothing.
Halfway through dinner, the phone rang. It was Hank Ruth. And he said, Archie's been fired. Get to the office and save the evidence.
The young prosecutors got there before Angie Lano, the FBI man they'd always worked with.
So went up, a couple of the assistant prosecutors were there, and they said, started yelling at me.
Accused him of treachery, treason, working with the enemy, having been a pawn of the White House. We put it every which way we could.
So finally, Henry Ruth shows up, and I figured, oh, my salvation. So Hank comes in, and I said, we go into the office, I said, Hank, first of all, I don't want to be here, and I told him what had happened.
I said, whose side are you on, Angie? Are you with us or are you against us? And he said, I'm just doing my job. I said, well, where are your written orders, Angie?
And I just said, take it out on somebody else. I didn't want to come here. I don't want to be here, and I'm going to get out of here as quick as I can.
Despite the FBI and the late hour, the special prosecutor's office was besieged by reporters.
Continuing the investigation?
We were told they were going to stop anybody. Could you tell me? My name is stopping you from going out. Our press guy, Jimmy Doyle, came into my office finally and grabbed me and said, we're going upstairs. And I said, what for? And he said, the press is up there. You should have done this a long time ago. And marched me upstairs to a very small room where we had our library. And it seemed like the entire Washington press corps was in there. It was smoky, it was dark, it was really mayhem. I must say, I suppose that human emotions take over in this kind of occasion, because one thinks that in a democracy maybe this would not happen, and that maybe we could proceed in good faith to prosecute those who have violated the criminal law. Apparently that is not to be the case, and we have been abolished.
The news bulletins went on late into the night.
The Tonight Show will not be seen tonight, so that we may bring you the following NBC News special report.
Mr. Cox's comment when he was told that he was apparently about to be fired was, "Whether ours shall continue to be a government of laws and not of men is now for Congress and ultimately the American people."
An investigator appointed to investigate scandals was fired because he insisted on investigating scandals.
The president may have an even more grave constitutional crisis on his hands.
In my career as a correspondent, I never thought I'd be announcing these things.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
An astonishing thing is happening here. He is getting an applause, not necessarily from the reporters, but from the Justice Department employees who are, as you see, lining the balcony. This is unusual.
Richardson's successor, on the other hand, didn't enjoy taking the blame for the president.
And I have asked all the personnel in the department to stay and help keep the department going in this extraordinarily difficult time. About the prosecutions.
Well, I did something I had never done before. I went into the press room.
General Hay, in the back of the room now, and then
General Hay, did you order the FBI to take over the offices on Saturday night? And if so, why?
Guilty.
General Hay.
Amid this chaos, the White House failed to carry out its plan to dismiss Cox's staff. So, the rest of the prosecution staff sat tight.
The White House announced last night that you were abolished. Now, when did you begin to get word that you weren't abolished?
You know, the White House announced we were abolished, but if they announce the sky is green and then you look up and the sky is blue, now I presume that in the normal course of events that to abolish an agency takes some time. We are going to try like hell. We are a criminal prosecution force. We have reason to believe there's been some serious crime, and we want to prosecute it.
That's the White House now.
It's very hard to describe how it feels to be fired by a president and disobey. All of a sudden, bundles of envelopes started to be dropped on our floor. And these were telegrams from the American people saying, hang in there, stay there, don't leave. And everybody was really caught up.
A record 150,000 telegrams condemning the president flooded Washington that weekend. Western Union had to call in extra workers and reprogram its computers to handle this firestorm of protests. Now Congress began to talk impeachment.
Most of the telegrams are short. They just say, impeach Richard Nixon or force him to resign.
Even though Cox was gone, Nixon still had to respond to the court order for the tapes. He had to recall his lawyer, who had already flown home to Texas.
I'm afraid that was over-optimistic after what happened yesterday.
The lawyers waited for instructions. Would the president bow to the wave of protests or remain defiant? He had until the court hearing on Tuesday.
We had no idea what Charles Allen Wright was going to say. No idea at all. I thought we were headed towards some kind of need to bring a contempt action against the president. There were no speeches, there was no preamble. Charles Allen Wright just got up and said,
there would have been those who would have said that the president is defying the law. This president does not defy the law.
At which some of us almost broke out laughing, given the events of 3 days previous. And then he said the president would turn over the tapes that had been requested. Extraordinary.
I would say these people are going to cost $1 million over the next
When Richard Nixon yielded and agreed to hand over the tapes, he knew they could destroy him. Soon, everyone would know.
If you can get it in cash, I know where it can be gotten.
Want to know more about the corruption of American politics and the fall of Richard Nixon? Watergate is also a book by Fred Emery, who covered the scandal as it happened. Ask for Watergate at bookstores now.
Up next, Watergate continues on the Discovery Channel.